I've been working 41 years. And most of those years, I've been contributing to Social Security through FICA tax and my various employers. In this video, I want to talk to you about how Social Security actually works, how you would qualify for benefits, how contributions are made, and how the overall system is funded. Earlier today, I ran my own Social Security estimate. I went to SSA.gov and pulled my own Social Security statements. And I want to do a break even analysis to see what it would mean if I were to collect early versus late. So, this is me and my benefit and how much I would earn. If I were to take it at 62, which is early, I'd get 25.76. If I were to wait until 64, 2 years later, I would get 29.98. And full retirement age for me is 67. I would get 36.40. And then, of course, delayed is 48.41. I do not intend to do that because it doesn't make sense when we do a break even analysis on me for that. But let's talk about how Social Security actually works. How do you qualify for benefits? Well, a worker needs at least 40 credits, and you can earn up to 4 credits a year. But Social Security makes it easy. There is a lifetime of 40 credits. You could get 4 and go on the fast track and get 4 for 10 years straight, or you can get 1 to another year. And as long as they equal up to 40 by time you go to collect benefits, you would qualify. They also set the benchmark low. So you only have to pay Social Security tax on $1,730 to qualify for 1 credit. And you could make 4 credits in a year. So you could earn 6,920, so 6,920 in one paycheck if you get paid that much and be eligible for the 4 credits a year. So 40 working credits over your working lifetime. So at least 10 years of work, considering you can get no more than 4 a year. And then Social Security looks at your working history for 35 years. So they look at the highest 35 years of earning. And if you've worked less than 35 years or you took a break and you just didn't work at all, they would simply plug a 0 into some of those years. So as long as you have the 40 credits, you're golden, you're in the system, and you're eligible to collect Social Security. So that's one. How do they actually collect money for Social Security? Well, Social Security is collected as an employee through FICA and as self-employed through SECA. So FICA is Federal Insurance Contributions Act. We always have to look up what the acronym means. So Federal Insurance Contribution Act, and that's through your payroll taxes at work. 6.2% of your earnings are taxed for Social Security, up to a maximum each year. And so once you hit that maximum threshold for income, you stop being taxed. Now, this year, that number is 176,100. But prior years, that number was a lot lower. So I want to pull up just to show you what it was. All the different years, there were lower thresholds of income. So over the 40 years, even if I earned the IRS maximum on what they would charge, tax, Social Security, my income, I would have paid no more than 215,000 into Social Security over 40 years of my portion. Now, the employer, because it's FICA, would pay 6.2% as well. I also am paying 1.5% towards Medicare tax, and my employer would pay that as well. But that does not have a max. So if the more you make, the more you pay into the system. In fact, if you're a high income earner and you're single and you make more than $200,000 a year, there's an additional Medicare tax of 0.9% on your income once you pass that threshold. If you are married, then it is $250,000 and they charge more. But in this video, we're going to really mostly focus on Social Security tax. So Social Security tax as an employee is 6.2% of your income, and it stops when your income hits $176,100. So high income earners are not taxed a penny above that. Anyone who earns less, they just should simply pay 6.2% on whatever income they earn. But what if you are self-employed or you work for a small business? Well, then you are paying into SECA. So that is Self-Employed Contributions Act. And that means you're paying both portions. You're paying 6.2% as the employee and 6.2% as the employer. You no longer have an employer paying, you're the employer, particularly if you're a 1099 employee and not running it through a business. So small business owners, if they're incorporated, they're paying yourself wages. So the business pays the employer's share and you pay the employee's share. So that's how it works. So the maximum contribution in 2024 was 168,600. And so that meant that 6.2% was 10,453. This year, the maximum you're going to pay as an employee is $10,918.20. So when you hear people saying that they paid into the system, this is absolutely true. But a lot of people end up using more than they pay into it. And we're going to get into that. So it's a pay-as-you-go system. Social Security is not a savings account. The money that I've been paying into the tax each and every year doesn't go into a bucket of money that is saved for me. It goes into the overall system. Current people who are working and paying payroll tax are paying for current retirees. They're paying for survivor and disability benefits as well, because Social Security itself is called, what is it called? I'm forgetting the acronym. Old Age Survivor Disability Insurance. So OASDI. That's really what Social Security is. Old Age Survivor Disability Insurance. Some of these acronyms I don't know offhand. So it's not a savings account. Your contributions do not go in a bucket of money that is then tiered and saved for you later. You're essentially, your current payroll is being used. The money we pay is paying current beneficiaries, retirees, and survivors and those on disability. That's how it's being paid. If contributions that are made out to Social Security recipients in the year, then they go to the trust fund. So essentially, if the contributions we make as payroll employees, if let's say a lot of people are employed, small businesses employed, and there's excess money, more is coming in than is going out, then that would go into a trust fund and they would buy US Treasuries. That trust fund is being depleted a bit because there's not enough going in and there's more going out. But they're saying that current year contributions are paying, I believe current year contributions are paying current year benefits. So maybe a little bit extra. They're fixing the problem because each year they're rising the level of income that you pay on Social Security. So last year, again, it was 168,600. This year it is 176,100, and it's going up a bit each year, quite a bit. I think it jumped by 8,000. 176, yeah, approximately. So if they don't have enough to pay, they go to this trust fund. If they don't have enough to pay current beneficiaries with the payroll tax, they go to the trust fund and they use that money, the surplus that they had from Treasury. So it's not like the trust fund is compounding the same way as your money in your retirement is, because essentially money coming in is paying money going out. Any excess goes into a trust fund. That trust fund is put into treasuries. That's how it's paid. So Social Security is essentially a social insurance system. You're pooling contributions from people who are working like me and across generations, and then you're paying them out, providing guaranteed inflation-adjusted income for life plus survivorship plus disability protection. That's what it is. So now that you understand how you qualify and pay into it, that sets the stage for the bigger question. When should you collect? So I pulled my own. Everyone who has earned enough in credits is eligible. And there's a full retirement age for every individual, depending on the age that they were born. Most people now are full retirement age going forward is 67. So people getting full benefits would be at 67. For me, my full retirement age is 67, and I would get 3,840 if I collect. Actually, I showed you this. I pulled my statement today. So I want to pull this. Again, full retirement age for me is 67. If I get it at 62, I would get 2576. And if I take it a bit early at 64, not 62, I would get 2998. And if I wait till 67, full retirement age, I would get 3840. And then delayed retirement at 70, if delayed Social Security benefit, that is, it would be 4841. So I get approximately 30% less if I take it at 62 versus 67. In fact, it's actually 33% less if I take it early. But that means it's 49% more if I wait. So is it worth waiting to take it at 67 to get 49% more? So 30% less in general is really 43% more. And I want to go into that really quickly because I don't think a lot of people make that math connection. But if you take $100 and you take 30% of it away, it would bring you down to 70. If you add 30% to 70, it would only bring you to 91. So going down 30% is not the same thing as going up 30%. You actually need higher returns to get back to the original. The only time that you need really small returns is when you lose a small amount. So if you lose 50% on a stock, 100 going down to 50, you would actually need 100% return to make that 50 go to 100. So important to note that when thinking about your benefits being reduced by 30% approximately, you need at least a 43% gain. And Social Security has set that in because you get an 8% gain each year, but it's also indexed for inflation. So 8% on 8% on 8% over those years, most people think they could take the money out and put the early benefit in and have it compound for themselves. But it's very hard to beat the percentage that you would get in leaving it with Social Security. It's much safer if your intention is to do that, to leave it with Social Security. Now, that said, how do you determine your break-even analysis? And what is a break-even analysis? Let's talk about it. The break-even point is the age when your total lifetime benefits from starting Social Security early equals the total from waiting until later. So if you claim it early, you're going to get smaller amount, but more checks. If you claim it later, you're going to get a larger amount, but a smaller number of checks, because taking it at 62 versus 67, that is 60 extra payments. So how do you figure out the break-even point. It's pretty easy, actually. You multiply the early benefit, the head start you're getting, by the number of months that you're getting ahead. So if we were going to figure out 62 to 67, we would take the monthly payment of 25.76 and multiply it by 60, 12 months for 5 years from 62 to 67. And that would equal, I have to look at my numbers so I don't have to do the math. If you start early, you'd get 154,560 before you turned 67, collecting it between 62 and 67. The next thing you do is you look at the monthly advantage between 67 and 62, because this is a 62 versus 67 analysis. So if you get it at 67, or I did, that is, I would get 3840 minus 2576. That's going to tell me the monthly advantage amount. And that is actually $1,264. So if I take it later, I'm going to get $1,264 more a month. Now I would take that $1,264 and divide it into the 60 months that you got money. How many months would it take to divide that extra payment? How many months would it lead up to? And that would actually be 122.2 months. That's equivalent to 10.2 years. It's that simple to figure out your break-even point. Then you take that 10.2 and you add it to the 67, because that is the number you're trying to figure out. So 67 plus 10.2, and that would mean by 77.2 months, or 2 months, that would be a little over 2 months because it's 0.2. That would mean that by the time I turned 77, I would have all of a sudden broken even by waiting. And that means every month thereafter, after I turned the age 77, I would be collecting an additional $1,264 a month. So that's the break even. Before 77.2, the person who started collecting at 62 would win out in this example with these numbers. Because if I were to die at the age of 80, waiting would have benefited me. Now, of course, there are other things that go into the deciding factor. How is my health? Would collecting it early make more sense for me, having the money earlier? And then that's the case, I like to think about doing the math on the 64, because I do think taking the benefit for 62 is a bit early in my case, because I have a lot of money in retirement that I have to do conversions before I have to actually pay taxes on them, and I don't want to be collecting Social Security and making my income go up. So it may make sense for me to take it at 64. So now I'm going to do the math between 64 and 67. That's 3 years. So 3 years is 36 months. So I'm going to take the 2,998 times 36, because between 64 and 67, that would be 3 years, 36 months, 12 times 3. And that would be 107,928. That's the head start. I would have a head start if I took it at 64, if I collected the 298 a month at 64, which would be my benefit. But now we have to figure out, what is the monthly advantage? Should we take the 3840 minus the 2998, and the monthly advantage is a lot less now. It's 842. Because if I were to wait until 67 versus 64, I'll get $842 more a month. So then I take the 107,928 divided by the monthly advantage amount. And that would give me a total of 128 months, 0.1. So that's divided by 12, that is 10.7 years. So I go from 64 plus 10 No, sorry, 67 plus the 10.7 equals 77.7 years. Anything under this amount, if I live anything under, it made sense for me to take it early. If my longevity is above 77.7 years, then now all of a sudden I am collecting 842 a month had I waited. But because I didn't wait, if I took it early, that means I'm losing out. And the more years I live is the more I lose out by not waiting. So that's the difference between those two numbers. So once your break-even point is crossed, the later claim and the later the later time that I was supposed to claim would have won out. And it would have made more sense for me to wait, right? That makes sense. I would have gotten $842 more a month. But if I were to die earlier so that longevity checkpoint of when your life ends makes a difference. If I would die at 66, I would have only collected 2 years of Social Security. I might have had it to go enjoy my life, do a couple things, and I might have never reached full retirement age. So there is that. So longevity, your outlook, how long are you going to live? What is your health? What do you need the money for is another thing. The other thing you want to think about is survival benefits. Are you married and two of you are collecting Social Security? And if one Social Security is low because they didn't earn a lot of credits, or they didn't earn, well, they earned all the credits, but they didn't pay a lot into the Social Security tax. Now remember, the more Social Security tax you pay, the higher your benefit. I should have mentioned that before, but that is the truth. People who pay more in Social Security tax end up getting more in benefit, but the benefit maxes out. Because I've been working 41 years, the years where I had lower income are now being wiped out by years that I have higher income. They take the highest 35 years of income. And so that is why my Social Security payment is much higher. In years prior, Social Security payments, again, were very low. On years where, let's say 1990, you only paid taxes up to $28,800. People paid $1,785 in taxes for Social Security back then. So they didn't pay a lot. And then if we go forward, actually shouldn't go that. If we go to 2000, people earning up to 76,200 paid 4,700. Now I didn't make that much back in 2000. I think I was getting paid 45,000. So I left one job to another. So I remember what I was making. But that was the amount that the maximum you would be taxed. Social Security only went over 100,000 in taxes in 2008. So incomes, they used to tax incomes below 97,000 all years prior to 2007. So back in 2007, the most anyone would pay into Social Security as an employee would be $6,045. So over the 40 years that I was working, the most I would have paid. So essentially, if I were to collect Social Security at the age of 64, it would take me not even 12 years, probably 6 years, as the money I put in alone to breach the 200 and because this is 3 years. So in 6 years, I would breach the 215,000 that the max anybody put in those 40 years. But of course, your employer is putting in as well. So between me and my employer putting in that, even if I hit the max, which I did not, my employer would have put another 215,000 in. So 415,000 would have went in from payroll taxes, both from me and the employer. But I didn't reach these numbers back when I first started out. I mean, as a matter of fact, there's only been very few years that I've actually reached the numbers of, and then some years because they went up so much. Like, so for instance, they jumped. Social Security has jumped. So now it went from 137 to 142 to 142 to 147 to 160 to 168 to 176. So the amount that Social Security is taxed is gone higher over the years. But that just means the people are, it's taking more tax and income. But essentially, the most it will take from anyone, any employee this year is 10,918 towards Social Security. And so people getting benefits are getting way, way more than that. So you need a lot more people in the system working and paying into it. So essentially, I ran the numbers and I created a chart. And so here's my chart, just so we can go over it. This is a side-by-side comparison. So this is early, what I would get paid, 62 versus 64. This would be, I would get paid early, I'd get $25.76 a month at 62. If I waited to 67, I would get $29.98. The head start I got from 62 to 64 would be 2 years of $25.76 payments. That would be 61. My monthly advantage from waiting for this to that would be 422. And that break even between those 2 years of collecting, it would just be 12.2. It would be 76, and I would break even. By 76, it would have made for me to make sense. And then that point forward, I would be getting another 422 more. The next is, but that was between 62 and 64, waiting between those 2 years. 76 would be the break even point. The next is 62 to 67. Again, it is 2,576 that I would be getting at 62. 84, 3840, waiting till 67, full retirement age. The head start I had from 62 would be 154,560. The monthly advantage difference between collecting at 67 versus 62 would be 1,264. It would take me 10.2 years from the age of 67, so that would put me at 77.2 years, if you see that. If I'm closing it there. And then 64 versus 67. If I take collected at 64, I'd get $29.98. If I wait till 67, of course, my full retirement age benefit is $38.40. The difference of collecting it early, those 36 months, would be $107,928. That would be an $842 monthly advantage by waiting until 67, and between 64 and 67. And then that would be 10.7 years. That would put me at approximately 78 years, or 77.7 years. So I always think that this stuff is interesting. I think you should be running your own break-even analysis. If you have money that you are, be careful with this. If you have money that you have in retirement funds that you could live on, if you have other things that you can use, it makes sense potentially to wait. Should know your longevity. In my case, my parents lived both into their 80s, and so longevity runs in my family. And so it may make sense for me to wait a little bit later. But I do like the idea of taking it a little bit early, waiting not to have some of that money, and maybe it would mean that it could fund a little bit more giving or my lifestyle or whatever. I don't know what I'm going to be doing back at that age. But essentially, those are the decisions people are going to have to make. That's how you figure your break-even analysis. If I were to start collecting at 62 and I were to live beyond 6 years, then yeah, I would be getting more than I personally put into it. If I go over 12 years, I'd be getting more than me and my employer put into it. And even if it was getting a little bit of money because it was excess in the trust fund, that money wouldn't have grown as much. Now, sure, it would have grown a little bit for myself had I been putting it in the market, but that was over 40 years that I would be doing it. In the early years, there was a lot less money that I was putting in. So even if that money doubled, you could say that they're not getting that money. They're using it for current benefits and paying it that way. Anyway, I hope this was helpful. Thank you for listening if you made it this far, and hit like and subscribe and let me know if this helped you at all. Thanks. Take care. Bye.